Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me as always, some of the sharpest minds in the biz. This week we got Mike Bond. He needs no introduction. He's in Toronto. Nolan King, another top dog in MMA media. He's in Boston. And of course, Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's in Las Vegas. And this week, he's got double duties. He's on the ones and twos. Guys, let's start with Paddy Pimblett, man. The guy stole the show this past weekend at UFC Fight Night 208 in London. Afterwards, he stated that he's now too big for the O2 arena, and he will be a pay-per-view fighter. Is that the right call? Can the UFC take his star to the next level with a pay-per-view fight, or is he better served staying in the UK for that market where he has been bringing the house down? Also, do you keep him and teammate Molly McCann on the same cards? Mike, you know the deal, 4 minutes. You're leading off.
Well, I guess to answer the last question first, absolutely keep him and Molly together as much as possible. This is a great thing they have going for them. Maybe do their post-fight media separately because Paddy Pimblett could barely get a word in at the press conference. Molly McCann was a little tipsy, you could tell, but nevertheless, it was good entertainment. But as far as kind of what comes next for Paddy, I think it really depends on what the UFC schedule shapes up to look like. If they're not going back to England until, say, maybe next March, you're not going to keep him on the sidelines for that long, right? So we need to keep him active. I like the idea of bringing him stateside, maybe to the MSG card in November or maybe December in Las Vegas. That would kind of be in what Paddy himself hinted at. I don't think he's too keen on fighting in New York, given the state taxes there. But I think one of these cards he would be a good fit on. And I'd be curious to see how kind of the fan base travels for him. We all think of, Conor McGregor in those prime years, how the Irish fans would come out and force for him wherever he fought. And I'd be curious to see if that popularity kind of bleeds over with Paddy and is able to have kind of the traveling crowd. So I think to me, it's a good move to do that. I don't think you do a crazy step up in competition, something fairly lateral to a Jordan Levitt, and I think you kind of push forward from there. But I think he'd be a nice addition for like an opening fight on a pay-per-view main card on one of these tail end of events, and then maybe bring him back to the UK like first quarter of next year if they go back there.
All right, Mike, do you agree with Mike? Sorry, Nolan, do you agree with Mike? He's saying pay-per-view and keep him and McCann together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what they're going to end up doing. I mean, even when he's conceded that, and he's the one I think that initially brought this up, like couple days before the fight, even like this is going to be my last fight here, and then I'm going to pay-per-view. So it seems like he's all aboard on that. But it's easy to fall into these Conor McGregor comparisons. I think it's not necessarily fair to do to him. I said the same thing about Ian Gary recently. It's like we have such a that was such a historic, monumental run of a prospect that became a star. So I don't like comparing to McGregor too much, but I do think if you were to look at McGregor's coming out party, whatever you want to call it, when he headlined that show in Dublin, I feel like that really exploded his popularity. So I wouldn't hate it if they had one more back home, even if it was just an event that was essentially solely crafted towards him, have him as a headliner or something against somebody that's maybe, not necessarily a huge jump up in competition, but maybe some veteran guy that you could at least kind of put as a B-side and have it really revolve around him. You could put McCann in the co-main event. I think that is kind of what the level of popularity of these two are at right now. Even if their skill, what they've proven inside the cage skill-wise isn't up to maybe a headline and co-headlining, I think we could have gotten away with it. But they're going to have him on pay-per-view. I think it's a good move for him to test the international waters. And like Mike said, we got to keep them together because I think that's they kind of their storylines run parallel at this point.
All right, Goes, you and I were in Las Vegas. We'll take a show like that with those two, right? Or do you want to keep them separate, or do you like pinball?
Bro, I say you ride this till the wheels fall off. Look, you're never gonna lose out featuring them in the UK. That's fine. But a pay-per-view here in the United States, especially in Las Vegas, I think that's something that we could probably pull off. And I don't like comparing him to Conor McGregor, but I do like to compare him to Sean O'Malley. And I think the difference here is we know a little bit more where Paddy Pimblett is going as far as his skill set and all that. There's a little bit more question marks with Sean O'Malley that we still need to answer, and that's going to happen soon. But with these two, you got to keep them together. Look, you saw Vince McMahon. He just retired, right? Let's steal a little page from wrestling while they have their backs turned to us. This is a tag team. Keep them together going forward. Now, how realistic is that? I don't know. Fighters get hurt. They have their own separate lives. Who knows if they want to fight on every card together, that you can make it happen. But I'm sure they really want to do it. If I'm another fighter, though, in that division, I cozy up to a flyweight in the female division, and I call them out like another tag team. We'll take both of those on the same card.
Hey, I like that. All right. That's not a bad idea. Antonina Shevchenko, are you hearing that? You palling around with another fellow lightweight? That'd be nice. All right. Good stuff, guys. Let's go on to the second topic. One of the guest fighters for the London card, of course, was Iron Michael Chandler. He teased a potential fight versus Dustin Poirier during the media scrum. Let's not also forget that around the water cooler, the talk there a few weeks ago was maybe Chandler versus Conor McGregor. Not a crazy idea, not just Joe Schmoes discussing it. Dana White is even warm to it, right? But my question to you is, which fight would you rather see? I got to throw something in there, though. Dustin's ready to go. Conor may go next year. So for those of you that might say, come on, man, McGregor all day, think about it. Nolan, start things off. It's on you, sir.
No, George, you're just stealing my point before. You're not leaving me much to work with here, man. No, that's it right there, the timeline. You know, I think as of right now, it seems like Dustin's been ready to go. It seems like Michael Chandler's, getting to that point where he's looking to have a big next booking. And, I mean, we still don't really know a totally hard timeline on Conor McGregor. I mean, whatever he's, John Kavanaugh, I think, said January or whatever. But it's like, we've heard him say all sorts of different timelines during his recovery. We really haven't had anything firm from Dana White other than saying, when Conor's ready, we'll bring him back, whatever the usual throwaway line is there. So for me, let's get this fight out of the way. Let's have Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier fight. There's not that we really needed any sort of heat behind this, but obviously there was some sort of issue that occurred that obviously will sell the fight a little bit more. You get a great fight out of it. And then, I mean, let's face it, if this fight can be booked in, I don't know, September, November, whatever it is, it's not crazy that either guy could have regardless, win, loss, whatever of that matchup, could end up swinging around to fight Conor McGregor in early 2022. So I think let's strike when the iron's hot or whatever here, not to make a Michael Chandler nickname joke, but let's book this one, man. Let's book just Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler. Let's see it.
All right. How about you guys? You with Nolan or you got the other side?
I think I'm going to probably make my decision at the end of what I say. I don't know, because it's so close. With Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor, I like it because it gives everybody a little bit of time to build up. Michael Chandler's like a family guy. He can go away. He's made some good money. He's had some good fights. I think he let his body rest a little bit and wait for that big payday. Remember, a lot of people don't realize that it wasn't that long ago that Michael Chandler was in Bellator, right? And here he is in the UFC. He makes us feel like he's been here this whole time because of the dynamic and how well he fits in, dude. He's turned a corner in his promotion. And this is what stands out for me, and I think this is what stands out for the UFC, is the build-up to that fight with Conor McGregor. Those two are going to be in each other's face, going at it. I don't know that you get so much of that with Dustin Poirier. Now, the Dustin Poirier fight in the cage, I feel like will be a better fight, but I feel like there'll be mixtures of chaos and technique, and it'll be great. But the build-up alongside the fight with Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor, I think that's a little bit too hard to pass up. The UFC shown their hand before. We all know what they love. They love money, and I just can't see a scenario where this doesn't translate into big bucks for the UFC. So if I gotta pick one, I would say wait a little bit, Michael Chandler, and get that big fight.
All right, Mike Bond, how about you, man? You're the tiebreaker here.
I think I disagree with Goes, honestly. I mean, from what we've seen so far between Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor, it's very, respectful. Michael Chandler being like, this would be such a great fight, just doing like all the very nice guy route to getting it. And the few times Conor has like tweeted at Michael Chandler, it's been very respectful as well. So I don't think we'd get, a ton of heat between those two leading up. I'm sure it would turn into like a competitive animosity, but between Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler, I think there's a genuine, like, those guys rub each other the wrong way. I think it started from, the night when Michael Chandler made his UFC debut against Dan Hooker, and there was talk of, is he going to get a title shot if Dustin Poirier sits out to do the Conor trilogy fight, kind of what's going to happen there. And you could see Dustin Poirier didn't like the fact that he's taken the hard road or the long road in the UFC, big times ups, big time downs, to get to kind of the top of the mountain, whereas Michael Chandler came in, won a big fight and was kind of the UFC's golden boy to an extent. So I think there is some genuine kind of just like friction between those two. And I think if you look at the lay of the land in this division right now, it makes a lot of sense given who's booked up. If we knew firmly Conor's 100% coming back in January, I'd probably advise Michael Chandler to sit out until like he 100% knew he wasn't getting that fight or was. But given what we know and what we don't know and what's on the table, I think this fight makes a lot of sense. I think they should, strike while the iron is hot, as Nolan said.
Yeah, I like that
Man.
dust up they had at UFC 276. Heck, man, I'm already thinking put it on that card in September. It needs help because UFC 280 is jacked and stacked the following week or the following month, and we're going to talk about it here. Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev is set. They will be headlining UFC 279 on September 10th. This will be the main event of the pay-per-view. Yep, a 5-round non-title fight. I'm down though. You guys good, or you got a problem with this matchup? Goes, start things off, get the party started. 4 minutes.
I mean, we're all gonna win regardless, right? But the best fight to make for me was Dustin Poirier. I think they kind of set that one up perfectly. They could have made that. I think the fans would have been into that. I think that fight. I think it's a closer fight on paper, but what the UFC really did here was kind of show us their hand and what their relationship with Nate Diaz is. To give him Khamzat Chimaev, that is an absolute monster. They are not too friendly with Nate Diaz right now. We can tell what they want to do. Here's the thing, though, guys. I feel like this fight's going to be a lot closer. I think Nate Diaz is going to have some moments here, okay? Here and there, but I don't think it'll be enough. But I want you to take out your pen and paper, George. Here's what's going to happen, all right? I promise you. Nate Diaz takes this fight. I'll have a couple moments here and there. I don't think he's going to win. He boxes Jake Paul. Then he takes a break, all right? He's going to spend some of that money. Then he's going to do BKFC. And after that, I bet you he will come back to the UFC for one more fight with Conor McGregor. It's going to be a little bit older. It's not going to be on the level of a Shamrock Gracie or anything like that. But I think it'll happen. Run this 3 years from now, SBC. You can either laugh at me or you can fist bump me. But I'm telling you, this is going to happen.
It's a 4-team parlay goes through out there. All right, how about you, Mike? What are your thoughts on this card? You down or not? Or the main event?
Well, to go off what Goz said there, I think maybe we do see Conor and Nate fight one day, but reminder, Conor McGregor has 2 fights left on his UFC contract, so entirely possible if Nate walks and Conor walks, we see that fight happen outside the UFC where those guys can take, the lion's share of the money for themselves. But as far as this fight with Chimaev, the writing has been on the wall for a long time here. This is the fight the UFC wanted from the outset when they knew Nate Diaz was unlikely to re-sign. It's what they wanted for the last fight on his deal. And here we are. It took a much longer road to get here than any of us had hoped. There was a lot of drama, a lot of tweets, all this stuff. But ultimately, the UFC wants to use the last bit of Nate Diaz's star power to elevate Khamzat Chimaev into what will likely be a title shot if he wins this fight. So it's kind of standard promotion from the UFC side. We've seen them try to do this. I'm not, in the camp of people who said, how could you do this to Nate Diaz? You're, throwing him to the wolves, literally. It's like such a bad fight, et cetera, et cetera. Nate Diaz wanted this fight. This is the one of the ones he said he was down to do it. He wants to go out, having fought the toughest guys in the UFC and kind of the biggest names. So it's kind of in play there. He's going to get a huge payday, a cut of the pay-per-view. People are going to buy this. So it's not some woe is me Nate Diaz situation. Is it the most winnable fight in the world for him? Absolutely not. It's a horrific style matchup. He's probably going to lose, but at the end of the day, he put himself in this situation. It's what he wanted to get out, and here we are. So I'm not going to complain about it. It's fine. I see it from all angles, Diaz's side, UFC's side, and Chimaev's side.
Nolan King, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting really corny puns with everything we've been saying recently, but like Mike said, the writing was on the wall when that video came out of Dana White in the war room, and we saw that in the background, and everybody was like, myself included, was like, who would want to see that? That's just a terrible mismatch, and I still feel that way. But it also goes to show you how much of I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm a sucker. Once this gets signed, sealed, and delivered, I start to have thoughts like, what if Nate Diaz goes in there and somehow wins on the last fight of his deal against the guy that the UFC is trying to push? All these thoughts start to go into my brain. So, I mean, I'm going to watch it. I'll probably be really excited for it once it gets there and those two guys are in the cage. But at the same time, I got to recognize that this is not necessarily a fair booking. It's one that I don't think makes sense. It's almost unfortunate that this is potentially the last time that we'll see Nate Diaz fight in the UFC, or it could be an MMA altogether. So, I don't love it. I think we all know what kind of matchup or what, in theory, we're going to see go down here. It's just a matter of having it play out and having Nate fight out his contract. So, I'm not really a huge fan of it, but I'm sure once it gets here, I'll be excited and I'll be that sucker.
All right. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know, man. I'm glad you guys are on this week's panel. I can say this, that if they stand, I think we'll be treated to something pretty special if Khamzat decides to stand, which a lot of people get, they get sucked into that Diaz type of fight. But if he goes in to wrestle, I think it's going to be a huge mismatch. And what I was trying to say was, man, this card needs a little bit of help. because this next one we're going to talk about is stacked, man. It's stacked so much. Even though it's a few months away, we got to talk about it. So a lot of announcements last week. The card is headlined by Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. It also includes Aljamain Sterling versus TJ Dillashaw. They were supposed to headline UFC 279, apparently. Now they got moved to UFC 280. Also, Peter Yan versus Sean O'Malley. Sean Brady versus Bilal Muhammad. Beneil Dariush versus Matthias Gamrot. Which fight outside of the main event has your attention and why? Heck, I'm even going to throw in Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Lemos. I think that one's going to be pretty sick too. Mike, we're coming back at you. 4 minutes. Start things off.
Man, just like take your pick, an embarrassment of riches here between all these fights. There's no really wrong answer. Obviously, I think both those title fights are exceptional. Oliveira versus Makhachev, just like, mwah, so good. But to me, this Piotr Yan versus Sean O'Malley fight, none of us really saw it coming. You know, I know these guys have been going back and forth on social media for quite a while now, but when, Sean O'Malley kind of announced the fight himself on DC and RC, I think a lot of people were surprised that they went with it, especially given how the last fight went for O'Malley against Pedro Munoz. So, man, like, this is the litmus test. There's no bigger test in this bantamweight division outside of a title fight than Piotr Yan, man. Like, this guy is so freaking good and has been a while, and we're going to find out what Sean O'Malley is all about in this fight. I think if you pick anyone in that top 5, you could make an argument this is maybe the most like stylistically friendly matchup for O'Malley. So I'm really curious to just see how this plays out on the feet, how Yan deals with the length and the reach of O'Malley. Just such a good fight, man. And if O'Malley wins, just strap a rocket ship to his back, because you're going to be able to do whatever you want with this guy at that point. And then obviously if Yan kind of knocks off the hype, he's right back in the conversation. So yeah, this is money. This is the fight that I'm most excited for on this card right now.
All right, next up, Nolan, how about you, man? Which fight tickles your fancy?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the first one we knew about for this card, which is Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady. I think both these guys are kind of pegged as like the dark horse of the division that's having a hard time booking a fight because they want to fight forward. They've kind of earned it, but none of the contenders, they want bigger names, whatever. But I mean, great math right here. We just add up the equation and put them together. I mean, I think that this is a fight that's not only elite, but it's also two guys that are improving pretty much every time we see them. And I think it speaks to the fact that the UFC is struggling to book them, shows you how good they are, how promising they are. So I'm excited for that. I think it has actual implications in that division. I think it will get either guy, whichever one wins, to that point where now they can have those top contenders be willing to fight them because their stocks are that high. So I like this fight. I think it's maybe going to be overlooked a little bit because of everything else that's going on. But I think these guys really have an impact, have the opportunity to make an impact at 170 pounds.
Well put, Nolan King. All right, Goes, how about you, man? Which is the fight that grabbed you?
Well, if you watch our watch-alongs, I think the underrated fight here is going to be me and George against our bladders, because this card is so stacked that I don't think we're ever going to be able to get up and even use the restroom. You're not going to want to peel away. But the one that kind of catches my eye is Beneil Dariush, man. Him fighting Gamrot. I feel like stylistically this is going to be a really, really fun fight. And look, what comes out of it, right? If Beneil Dariush can get a win, there's no denying him at this point. He's got to be next. I mean, you'd have to be a supervillain not to give him a shot. Gamrot's no joke. He likes to have a fast pace in a fight, and Beneil loves to do that as well. It's a 3-round fight, but here's where things get tricky. Beneil Dariush, I guarantee you, is training for a 5-round fight. And he's doing that because if something happens to that main event, that's the name that's being called out. And that deep down inside, the way he's training, you could say whatever you want. I'm focused on my opponent. Say it all day. We're not going to believe it. Maybe 90% of you is training towards Gamrot, but the rest of you is training for those other two guys. It's going to be in your head. And that's something that's going to be a little bit of a storyline. We won't know until they all actually weigh in. But it's going to be fun. And I think this fight's going to be a great fight. So that's the one I'm looking forward to the most.
All right. Well, you're right. It does serve as insurance. But, hey, guys, did you guys misunderstand me? Sterling and Dillashaw are on 280. They're not at 279. Nobody said them. So I'm going to throw that out there, man. I mean, that's a great fight. Not that the other ones aren't, because I started by saying it's stacked. So my vote goes to Sterling versus Dillashaw. I think that's going to be a great one. And now, Sterling passed a huge test in Peter Yan, obviously, but I think that was more personal. This one, I think, will get respect amongst everyone else if he can get past the former champ. All right, guys, let's get to the final question. How much pressure is on Amanda Nunes at UFC 277. Juliana Pena seems to have a free path to a trilogy even if she loses, but what if we get a repeat of the first fight? Give me the scenarios. Nolan, take it away. 4 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, she has all the pressure in the world on her at this point. I mean, you can go out there, you can have a bad night. You can go out there as the best women's fighter ever and say, hey, you know, it just wasn't my night. Juliana Pena had a great performance and I didn't show up. You know, something was going on physically, mentally. I played it wrong. I used my gas tank too much. My camp stunk. I had too much on my mind. I think people are willing to give her a certain amount of benefit of the doubt with the whole scenario. I mean, we've seen her fight so many times and that hasn't happened. So for her to go in there and have it happen, I mean, hey, we all have off days, right? But if she goes out there and it happens to her again, then you start really questioning, you know, I guess her status right now at this point in time in that division. I mean, she's a favorite once again. So clearly people think that was not a likely outcome, that Juliana Pena would go out there and beat her again. And so for me, I think it's a tremendous amount of pressure. I think a lot of times when we have these stars in the sport, their legacy is built both on their wins and their losses. I think, you know, and this will be part of her story. This will be something that people think about, like when they think of Anderson Silva getting, you know, knocked out by Chris Weidman. So she has the ability here, though, however, to kind of, I don't want to say reverse that first loss, but she has an ability here to say, hey, that was a fluke. That was not something that's going to happen. That was not who I am. It's not who I was, who I'm going to be. I'm going to continue to be the best women's fighter of all time. And I'll go out there and beat Juliana Pena again in the third one. So I think this is a huge, huge, huge fight for her and her legacy.
Okay. How about you, Goes? Give me your scenarios if Pena wins.
Okay, I don't think she gets a free pass here. Like, nobody ever called for Sarah versus GSP 3, right? I think there are scenarios here. Like, Juliana Pena said it herself on Tough. She said Amanda didn't show up for that fight. Those are her own words, and they may work against her. If she steamrolls over her in this fight, I don't know that we call for a third fight, okay? The weird thing about this Tough season is usually that platform's used to promote fights and to really get you into it, but it kind of had the reverse effect. Neither girl really went at each other too much. They had their moments here and there, but I thought it kind of dropped the ball, and it dropped the interest just a little bit, okay? So I think the only scenario that calls for that third fight is, with Juliana losing, is if it's somewhat of a close fight. It has to be. But if Amanda wins a boring decision or she just steamrolls her, I don't know that we call for a third fight. It just doesn't work that way, guys. We're going to look at it as maybe not a fluke. I don't want to say a fluke because she did earn that fight, or she did earn that victory. I don't want to call it that. But maybe we might look at it as the off night, and now the universe makes sense again, and we don't need to see it again. So I think those are the only scenarios that could work here.
All right, Mike, close up shop here. Topic 5. This is the final one.
Yeah, well, I guess I've learned that Goes is watch Tough, so thanks for doing that on behalf of all of us and relaying the info. But as far as kind of a third fight, I could see it happening. Maybe it's not like the type where you do it 3 straight fights, like Moreno versus Figueiredo style. But if Pena wins, one fight, we'll say Nunes goes and fights like Valentina Shevchenko or does something like that, maybe goes to 145 and defends that title, which no one has mentioned that she's also the champion of that division as well. So she loses here, Nunes too. Of course, she still is a UFC champion, so that's something to take note of as well. It's not like the most dreadful thing in the world. You can scrape, someone off the mat to get her to fight at 145 after this if you need to build her back up. But yeah, I mean, the pressure on her is immense here. I mean, to go from that run she was on to 2 losses to Juliana Pena, who people thought was going to be maybe one of her like easier title defenses coming into that first fight at UFC 269. I think it's a pretty detrimental, blow to her legacy a bit. Of course, you can't take away all the stuff she's done, but I think Amanda Nunes absolutely needs this fight in the worst way. And if she loses, I'm really curious to see what the post-fight conversations are on Sunday. And then when we get back here next week for Spring Back Clique.
All right. I think that if Pena wins, Nunes does have that other title to either contend with or, defend, obviously. But I think Pena and Valentina will be what we're chatting about, because Valentina's defeated Juliana Pena once, so I could see her wanting to chase champ status. That's my prediction. And great stuff, guys. Speaking of UFC 277, Goes and I will be hosting a watch-along here on MMA Junkie. And, of course, don't forget to comment in the YouTube section. I'm always down there throwing elbows. It's fun. Keep it respectful. And, great job by the panel this week. I can't even throw in my corny joke because it was the same panel as last week. But we'll see you next week
I
here.
got a corny joke. What is it about meatballs and elbows?
Nice. All right. We'll be back here next week to discuss all this on Spinning Back Clique.